Ah, fuck. Well, just a week after Batman wrapped up, Telltale released the first episode of The Walking Dead: A New Frontier. This is the only Telltale game I've made a full video on, and despite only being my second video, I still think it's kind of okay. I do use the O word,
I try not to sound too harsh when talking about games, but this is not objectively a great game.
and it is generally whiny in that kind of arrogant teenager way throughout, but I sure had some things to say. One of those things was that the game isn't good, and if you like it, you should say that it isn't good, but it's fine to like the game also.
And that's what usually annoys me, when people say something is a great game when it's really not a great game. You just thought it was great, which is fine, but don't make it out to be something it isn't. So again, it's totally fine if you thought the game was great, and I have no problem with that, but that doesn't just make it a great game overall.
Fucking yikes. Unlike Batman taking me a record 4 days, this game took me a record in the other way, 2 weeks. All of the Walking Dead adjacent games took me longer than average, even the first season took me about 10 days. The first 3 episodes of A New Frontier alone took me 10 days, as I took 2 whole 5-day breaks in between the episodes. I even accidentally played a whole other game in between episodes 2 and 3. It was an accident, I swear. That must be the only game I played that wasn't Telltale related after starting on Telltale. Well, ignoring Portal, Portal 2, Trials Evolution, Stray. Oh, and the PSP version of SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, which low-key is the best way to play those games because instead of the insipid, repetitive, and asinine commentary, the game will just play songs from the incredible soundtracks. You can take your slobber knockers and your opponent's groggies and your Michael Coles and shove them right up your candy ass. Well, no, while I'm jamming out to 3 Days Grace and Rise Against in my bed at 1 AM. Well, they're actually in the '07 game, but yeah. This was also the first Walking Dead game I actually got to experience for myself, as I had of course watched the other ones on YouTube. All these years and 3 playthroughs later, how do I feel about the game now? Honestly, it's a little complicated, but mostly not really, and I kind of like it and dislike it more than I already did. This one is going to be tough for me to write, because more so than usual, because I have a lot of random scattered thoughts that would probably serve more in a direct sequel to the original video, but we'll try our best, because that's the video, that's analysis.
I agree.
Yeah.
Good analysis.
That is, as Ross says, that is analysis.
That is analysis.
I found myself coming back to my notes for this game a lot. In fact, the very last thing I am going to talk about with this game was something that I didn't even realize until I'd finished every other game, like a whole month after the fact. Though I will say now that I think this game kind of jumps the shark for a Telltale Walking Dead game, and it won't even take that long to explain why, since it occurs in the first episode. And I gotta say, good golly above, this opening sequence deserves serious fucking praise.
There's a big book coming.
While it is jarring that the game is momentarily smoothly animated due to what I can only imagine is actual motion capture, the introduction to this game is genuinely incredible. We immediately see a unique perspective on the beginnings of the apocalypse, and the scene and musical are wonderfully unsettling. The little girl who becomes Mariana going to fill up her dead grandpa's water, the grandpa standing in the bedroom after she says that he's alive, he's awake rather, but that's the same thing I guess. Javier grabbing a bedpost like a baseball bat, which has meaning later, to do him in after not making it there in time for his death. It's fantastic, like, holy shit, you'd think the game would be good after all that. Har har. Seriously though, I can't overstate how well done this opening is. And there goes all the budget, I presume. Weirdly though, the quality continues. The very next scene jumps to present day, and it's a very clever one indeed. We're here with Kate, David's wife, and David's 2 kids, Mariana and Gabe, after we were all separated in the intro. Kate has figured out how to track a herd's speed by making a fire and seeing how long it takes them to catch up to the camp. 4 hours, she says. I know a thing or two about 4 hours. This means that they were waiting around for 4 hours just to make sure that they had that much time whenever they next stopped, so they could always be hours ahead of the herd. That's really smart. Why hasn't anyone else done that? Genuinely something new, and the following scene of the 2 smoking weed and chatting is also pretty good. Some good banter is had. I especially like Javier's boner line.
The second you start getting boners, the whole world starts to get dark.
I'm not hating this so far from it. We arrive at a junkyard to siphon gas, and the surprisingly refreshing slow pace is more than welcome. Mariana is trying to find a pen so she can write things down that she doesn't want to forget, since she realizes that her mother's old bedtime story that she once hated has abandoned her memory. Gabe is being fucking annoying, and that won't stop, and Kate is trying to temper her perpetually palpable panic about the herd. All was looking well thus far. Honestly, these first 45 minutes have been good fun.
But
The game then drastically drops in quality, to the point where I swear I could almost feel it within me. It was so palpable and predictable what was about to occur. Javier is run up on by some goons for trying to steal their gas, their gas that I guess they just left in an ambulance in a junkyard for some reason. Also yogurt, or pudding as they call it. Javier is then separated from his family and being driven away in a van with some guy who tells you to be quiet, so I did, and the game didn't account for my being quiet.
We still got a haul ahead of us, and I'm not about to listen to you. What the hell?
Skipping past meeting Clementine inexplicably eating an apple because cinema sins are awful, and Clementine accidentally shooting a guy who gave her blanks and slowly lumbers to attack in a strange scene that I already talked about in my prior video because it's a very confusing choice, what with Clementine not really being in the wrong, so why would you side against her? Anywho, the two end up in a makeshift jail cell of sorts. The immediate dialogue here is kinda perplexing and posed a strange question to me. One of the options is overly positive and the other two are vaguely negative, so you'll probably choose the overly positive one. I don't think this works at all, Javier having just met Clementine and reacting this way, but it does work with us already knowing her. So are we meant to be embodying Javier, who we've only had 40 odd minutes to get to know, or are we supposed to just pretend that Javier is Lee again and we're back with Clementine? I don't buy Javier being so quick to bond with Clementine, and part of the issue with having a new character who doesn't know Clementine is that the game almost seems to test you on what you're willing to let her get away with, since we'll predictably be on side even if the person we're playing as wouldn't or shouldn't be. That could make for an interesting disconnect where Javier is strangely drawn to Clementine because of the player input, making it so, especially since she is introduced to our character in a cold manner, but it instead feels like the game knew it had to have Clementine with us the whole way, so they put in a nonsense choice to make Clementine trust Javier, and not the other way around because we already do trust Clementine outside of Javier. Does that make sense? To be fair, I guess she does save him, but it's indirect and she's a bit of a cock in the moments after. For reasons I'm sure will come up, I just feel like Clementine's involvement detracts from the game. I was already liking the new characters, but the dialogue making Javier unrealistically bend to Clementine's arrival kinda muddies the water for me. The game doesn't feel like it's treating her on the same level. It feels like Clementine is special in this world when she should really be seen as just another person. Like she becomes a very integral and important part of the game at points, but we've only just met her. It's the inverse of Season 2, Clementine being thrust into a group's problems and the game hopes we'll care. This time, Clementine is thrust into our problems, and we can't help but care, even if Javier shouldn't care so much. And again, that in theory is fine, it's just maybe rushed. I don't think Clementine needed to be in this first episode at all, if you have to have her. Hell, this game uniquely released the first 2 episodes simultaneously, so you could have saved Clem for that second episode, and we wouldn't have even had to wait months to see her again. And it's kind of hard to like the characters when the stupid fucking annoying formula means that those guys from before are hiding in the bushes, and they fucking shoot Mariana in the head, and it's so bad, and I hate it, and Kate runs out to her, and then Gabe runs out to Kate, because Kate gets shot, and you have to either leave with them, or stay with Clementine, and I just don't understand why they do this every time. It's just the same thing, it's so annoying. It always has to ramp up in the least convincing way, it's so fake, so forced, so artificial, it's just fucking boring. Okay, let's take a breather. Maybe it's not that bad, and maybe it's fine to let a couple kids die, but I'm just so over this bullshit. Why has it become predictable that the kid is going to die?
It's called blocking, Matthew. It's cinema.
Yeah, I know.
Like Kurosawa.
I could see the Kurosawa coming before it hit me.
This is the moment in question where Telltale jumped the shark, or as I've dubbed it, kill the kid. I guess kill the anyone works, but I prefer kid, and clearly they do too. Something that is supposed to be poignant and emotional, but feels forced and desperately reeks of Telltale trying to be hip and trendy with the kids. By killing the kids. How do you do, my fellow kids, before fucking murdering them with his skateboard? Overall, it actually makes for a bang average episode. The intro was incredible, and much of the first half was really fun, but goddamn, they just can't help themselves. Given that I once had this episode as my least favorite, it is a considerable improvement, but I also understand why it was my least favorite. And then episode 2 is even worse, like disastrously worse, so if you thought this was bad. Though I did have an interesting thought after wondering why the load screens were still so long now. I won't mention it now because it relates to a character we haven't even met yet, so, you know. Anywho, Kate is bleeding internally, but Clementine reappears with a car and for some reason brought the group that were shooting at us along. I guess they were following her, but she didn't think to not come here since we're already here. She says she came back to warn us, but they were literally right on her tail and it instead seems more like they followed her and she led them. I'm with the Conrad effect, that was some warning, Clementine. Anyway, this guy who is the spitting image of binging with Babish is claiming we shot first. We didn't. Alright. Apparently, we stole from them and their stationary ambulance in a random junkyard, so that justified shooting a little girl in the head, and I'm the one who needs to answer to justice. They then pull out Francine, Conrad Effect's, I guess, significant other, and now a hostage that somehow the other guy was unaware of. How were you not aware of an entire person in your vehicle? I should say that it's unclear where Francine even comes from, as well as the truck Max and Babish arrive in. There is also a car, and the doors are already open, so I guess Francine was in their car, and that's why Max didn't realize. Anyway, Francine is killed, Prescott is fucking tear-gassed, and the leader, Trip, decides to just leave his people behind to be murdered in the opening credits, while helping complete strangers escape. He even acknowledges this in the next episode. What he says isn't untrue, but it rings hollow when he was prioritizing us strangers who have no stake in the town. But you know, I guess this opening sets the tone, but my god it was shit. This is already so bad, and it's been barely a half hour. The weirdness continues as we are stopped at an underpass by a gaggle of cars. Is it an underpass or an overpass? It's both, I guess. Clementine has a really strange... Oh, you can hear that as well. Oh, that's mad. If you can hear it rating, sorry. Clementine has a really strange moment here, where if you talk to her, she just starts venting about Jane and how having people means losing them.
It's complicated. I had a friend. Her name was Jane. Having people is nice, but it always ends up hurting in the end. Never think otherwise.
Okay!
Where did that come from? I get that people would be more willing to maybe overshare in these scenarios, but it feels like the characters can't wait to tell you all about their trauma and how it probably relates to what you're going through currently, instead of you having to actually suss it out, as mentioned in the Michonne part. I think back, again, to Season 1, and how I said that game wasn't so quick to let its characters reveal all their cards. Even a totally throwaway side character like Bree has the same level of nuance to her writing. If you're a dick to Vernon and his group, she will remember it, and just completely air you, and that's that. And she wasn't even a real character, she was a fan who won a contest to be put into the game. Anyway, of course a whole horde of walkers appear, and we end up on the roof, while Eleanor and Kate head off to Richmond. We were trying to make our way there per Clementine's suggestion, but now Conrad Effect is blaming her for us being in the mess at all. And he's kind of got a point. Kind of. It's not like she tear-gassed Prescott. It's here where we meet Jesus, a character I like who is barely in the game, and his introduction is quite good, but mostly hilarious because he hides from us to get the upper hand by using his clothes as a distraction. So I guess this implies that he just has an exact replica of this jacket and beanie, specifically for this purpose. I'm sure it's ordinarily just for wearing, but I found that implication very funny. Yeah. He also lets us know that Richmond has been taken over by the New Frontier, which prompts a Clementine-flavored flashback to something we have no context for. Yeah. We later learned whilst walking through a patented tunnel system that she is already branded with the New Frontier and was kicked out, so this flashback kind of just spoils the mystery of why Clementine is apprehensive. It also kind of feels like that could have just been the game, Clementine doing her own thing instead of it being flashbacks. Her whole position in this game is now trying to avoid the New Frontier, just as I was by taking 5 days to play the next episode, so why is she even in this game? More on that at the very end. Things go from bad to awful, with Conrad Effect grabbing Clementine after overhearing her explain the situation to Javier. He makes a decent point to use her as a bargaining chip when we get to Richmond, but I ended up shooting him. I didn't even mind Conrad Effect, and I kind of wish I could have kept him around because, as mentioned prior, he's just in the background for scenes where the game presumed he'd be dead, so it's really funny to just see him there. He can actually make it all the way to the end, which is just absolutely bonkers to me. What a king, just staying out of the drama and surviving the whole game. That's the Conrad Effect, baby.
Iconic. What a queen.
This wasn't a choice I wanted to make, and not in the good way where you're conflicted because it's hard to decide and you really care. Here, I was just rolling my eyes at how forced it was. Anyway, we get to Richmond, and there's some more useless and vapid bickering before Javier's brother David appears, and the episode mercifully ends. Terrible episode, just awful. I wasn't even mad, it was just a massive stinker, kinda shocking. I didn't think I would enjoy the game arguably less than I already did. I thought I was being too harsh on it, but it's just proven me right so far. I only really like the intro flashback with Kate, which I didn't even mention. Michonne Episode 2 may still have the stupidest moment, but it at least had some atmosphere. I can't lie, if this game was as buggy as Batman had been, this episode may have been my second half-star rating, alongside presumably Jurassic Park Episode 3. Fuck Jurassic Park Episode 3. Oh, and that cool idea I had was essentially me wondering if the game would be better were we playing as David instead of Javier. As I mentioned in different words, the game almost seems to be conveying some sort of cognitive dissonance with playing as Javier. When interacting with Clementine, we may as well be Lee again, or self-inserting ourselves into Javier. This makes the choices regarding Clementine kind of weird because obviously we're going to side with her, but Javier may not have outside of a basic empathy. So again, recontextualizing the choices and playing as David, what if the game straight up removed your choice in regard to Clementine? You don't get to decide, David just decides for you, and since he is a bit of an asshole, there'd be a weird dynamic playing as him. Again, it's not great or fleshed out or even makes sense, but as I said at the beginning of time when the video started, we're seeing how these games have changed or even evolved, and thus far, they don't feel like they've really done that, instead regressing and doubling down into their worst, most tired and unimaginative sensibilities because they were forced to pump several games out. So if Telltale are unwilling or unable to change or evolve, we have to work with what we have, and that's what I'm trying to do in recontextualizing the choices by changing as little as possible, and usually all the tools are already there to implement it, though admittedly less so in this case where I'm basically reimagining the first 2 episodes. And remember, not that we know about it yet, David has already had prior run-ins with Clementine, so if we were playing as him, it actually makes sense for him to already be stubborn about her and it's out of your control because you weren't in control of him then, during her flashbacks. Think back to my axing plotlines idea with Game of Thrones. Let's say you do spit in David's face in episode 3's flashback, and maybe that sets in motion some kinda irreversible attribute David has for Clementine adjacent decisions. I don't know. It's just a confusing game so far, and I want to meet it halfway with its characters, but then Clementine is just there, and I'm not sure how to feel, so I'm trying to involve her in the drama more directly, so it doesn't feel like she's only just there. And imagine instead of this episode 2, you were doing something else as David, and it ended from the other perspective, finding Javier with your wife almost dead. I don't know, as always it's more of a fun thought experiment and less an actual suggestion, but I think David had a lot of potential, as we'll discuss, and instead of just redoing the Kenny dynamic, why not have us play as him this time? And again, if the choices aren't going to matter, why not reorient things and have the protagonist be an asshole, his choices being vaguely the same in a bad or violent way, which conveys his inability or unwant to change and better himself. It changed the context if nothing else, and it's sort of new. I then played, and one day after finishing episode 3, got the Platinum Trophy for Spider-Man Miles Morales. It was pretty fun, and his mum was so fucking hot. Jesus.
What a lovely arse. His words, not mine.
Episode 3 was once my favourite of the game, and while an inevitable improvement over episode 2, because how could anything be that bad again, this episode was still pretty bad. Reading through my notes, there isn't much to say, and I don't actually know where to start. Just give me 1 second there, guys.
Is
this hold me like lift music?
While you're on hold, we appreciate the cultholicshop.com.
Adam Cole.
Baby.
Sacrificial lamb.
Yeah,
is what we'll call this one.
100%.
Alright, so David is trying to vouch for us to stay since he is one of the main 4 leaders of the town, but when we pipe up about Mariana being killed after David shittily asks us not to do that, we're immediately sent on our way. I didn't really remember even leaving during the episode, but I guess we do, and David gives us a bag with a map to follow, so we make our way through a forest, and Clementine reappears. Hooray! Why is she here? More at the end, as I said. More at end, that's what I wrote, anyway. The aforementioned Clementine flashback is also here, and the main thing I didn't mention is that they kick Clementine out of their new frontier for stealing medicine because of AJ, but then take AJ off her. That's a hell of a thing to not mention, it's the whole conceit. And I know I'm really nitpicking, but the sequence of events here is so dumb as we arrive at the factory. So I go over to the car, find a jack under its missing wheel, but I can't do anything to open the door, kill the walker, and get the handle. I first need to go over to the garage door so I can lift it a little, and then I can presumably grab the handle. Like why? Just let me grab the handle first. I'm almost certain the other games would have sent it right into my arse TARDIS. Why is the game being so strict about something like that? The game doesn't even recognize that the walkers are coming, and my screen is jammed until I try and fail to open the garage first. At least this little jaunt animation is hilarious. I enjoy this a lot.
Come over. I can't, I'm busy. My parents aren't there. Me.
Otherwise, this was just really boring. I was going mute a lot more than usual because all the Clementine-related dialogues are based off of me, the audience member.
You just looked at the 3 dots at the end and went, that's enough now.
There's a bunch of shit from other towns in this factory, and it seems that Binging with Badger and Max had a little squad that raided and stored their findings here. Despite Binging and Max being under David's head of security, he didn't know about it. This guy Binging with Badger is honestly cartoon levels of villain, saying he'd pop the little bitch's head again just to see it. Who is like this? Like, come the fuck on. Unprovoked and just chatting with your mates about the little girl that you murdered. Like, fucking hell, lad, get help. Even in this world, I don't buy it. And then a shotgun goes off next to Javier's head, which doesn't do anything, yet a pistol in the last episode does. We return and get captured. David is pissy because we tried to leave without him at Kate's request, which was brought on by a record 5th lemon-like moment. Not that I could tell him my lemon side of things.
Oh, those are the only two options he has. He does neither.
Oh, right.
I'm indecisive. I can't decide.
Other leader of Richmond, Clint, is initially disgusted by Kenny Omega's actions, but then very quickly decides to side with her. Cool. There's a CM Punk brawl-out joke in there somewhere, just as I'm reading that, but I don't know where it is, so I'll just say that and move on.
Shut up.
The haters came out, did they?
Shut up. I dress up as CM Punk ironically every day.
Jesus, what? Whoa! What's
We've
happening?
turned a work into a shoot, brother.
What's happened? Oh, do you mean like out of
Shades of
character?
late great CM
Do
Punk.
you mean like out of character, CM Punk?
Yeah, whatever works.
What? I don't understand.
Are
quite
there
what
any
he's-
dogs in here? Get the dogs out of here,
It's just 'cause you
quickly.
got the hat and the hoodie.
Oh, right. My word. I think Joe's just quite like CM Punk at the minute.
You leave Joel out of this.
No.
He's a good boy.
That's
Yeah, Joel. Yeah.
Listen, I just. Oh,
He doesn't share a bank account with his mum. You leave him alone.
He's gonna main event next year's Wrestle Kingdom, CM Punk.
I can't wait for it. So, Cookie Monster, what
Oh,
did you
that should have
think
been
of the magnificent Elimination Chamber?
Sorry, why wasn't that in the news? That was big news this week, wasn't it? CM Punk.
We just get done, basically. And now I'm missing Michonne because even that felt low-key in comparison. The main family drama is more than enough to fill it. Clementine just confuses things. Maybe David just has a small group like in the flashback. I don't know, it's not my job. But if it were, I'd make David's army friends that he mentions initially finding his group. I started thinking about this funny juxtaposition of these super serious, dedicated soldiers acting like they're at war, when it's just zombies and it's not that deep, because at this point, the people you run into are more trouble than The Walking Dead. Less is more, or something. I don't know, I like it. Also, blueberries aren't blue.
Oh, nice. Whoa!
Blueberries aren't blue.
Picturing ovulation.
Pure bloody evil, and you need to
John McCain dollar is in Toronto.
Keep the marker away from face.
What is this?
What the fuck?
We're in the right place. We're in good hands here.
I feel much safer.
Whoa! Holy fuck. I don't know why that got me so much, but we're in a flashback of David and Javier playing baseball, and some kid comes up asking for an autograph. I said, not right now. Javier obviously made it sound super aggressive, and the kid responds, I'm glad they kicked you out. That's the most I've been invested so far, good god. This is in reference to Javier playing baseball and being kicked out of his team for a gambling issue, or a drinking issue. I think it's gambling. It doesn't really matter, though I will say that writing this made me think of Disco Elysium's roll of a dice percentage choices and how that could have been used here. I mean, you've got a character with an actual gambling problem. How did they not do something more with that? What they try to do something with is David and Javier's dynamic, which, while a neat idea, is really undercooked. And I've been letting them cook since December 2016. I think the house is gone. Javier is fine, I guess, but David is just a grade A asshole at all opportunities. I guess the idea is that he is excelling in this role and world. The whole flashback is about him not being happy with his job and wanting to go back to the army. So I guess in that survival environment, he's thrive where most suffer. That's interesting, but it's kind of just it. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it, just the fact it's mentioned or implied. Also, his whole thing is family and how Javier is selfish, as we see immediately at the start of the game, yet he wants to leave his family behind for the army, thinking it'd be best for everyone. Like, bro, you got kids to raise, that's not Javier's responsibility. And there isn't much nuance to his argument, he's just kinda wrong if you ask me. Never mind, I guess I'm wrong for viewing David as a person first and a brother second. Maybe that's the idea, he'll defy the rules when it suits him and his immediate family, but only then. And I guess Clementine's inclusion acts as the game asking if you should trust her because we know her, or if we should trust David because he's family and Javier knows him. Whatever that means. The dynamic of Javier, Kate, and David is a decent one. I mentioned that as a high point in my initial video, but it mostly feels too concerned with another boring faction plot that has slightly different machinations or methods, but are ultimately all the exact same. I'm starting to feel like maybe there was a reason why in Season 1 Crawford was actually empty, and we didn't need a direct group or villain to oppose us. There is a really intriguing story here regarding family and how far gone someone is and how far you're willing to go to potentially save them because they are your blood, but it just isn't as highlighted as I wanted. David has legitimate reasons to be angry by the last episode, depending on your choices, so it makes sense for him to throw family in your face when he believes that you, his family, have betrayed him. But I'm also torn between David being written as a hypocritical asshole intentionally, or if it's just, well, not intentional. There are serious parallels with Kenny, but his descent is so tangible and apparent because he started as a meek, cowardly, all-talk fisherman, and by the end he was a violent monster. David, comparatively, is kind of just like this most of the time, already a bit of a dick, and then it really randomly ramps up in the final episode where he's borderline an abusive parent. But we're not there yet, and it does have its reasons, so I mainly don't know why it feels like the game is trying to be shocking about it. What is there yet, and currently, is the herd. What? which has somehow followed us from that first episode. That is very silly, and I like it a lot. Anyhow, we find Clementine in the doctor's office after Javier is stabbed. It doesn't matter. And this is weirdly, not at all weirdly, the most compelling stretch of the episode, where Javier finds a pack of tampons for her. It's a kind of cute moment, Clementine asking Javier why she started bleeding, and we get to see her be more the Clementine we probably remember, as opposed to this more hardened badass she's become. It doesn't ever feel weird, it's a good detail and a very natural, genuine moment finally. Also, there is a working computer in here, which excited me very much because it's so very mundane to any of us, and that of course works well in these hyper-bleak misery death games. Yeah. Clementine then patches up Javier's wound.
His torso is flawless. Fantastic scenes.
That was several hours ago.
That's a callback. I like callbacks, that's all I've got.
Before entering a flashback with Jane. Yeah, I totally forgot this game had flashbacks depending on your Season 2 ending. That's important later. The two are tossing walkers down a hill outside of Howe's. Carver's body is even there. It's a decent little scene, but once again, walkers appear from out of nowhere. Clementine falls down into the hole, and I'm just baffled that this even happens anymore. I alluded to it earlier in Season 2, but why do we need this? Why can't we have a few minutes of characters just talking without walkers showing up in this way? Jane turning around in surprise when we can already hear them right there. It's just so stupid and disappointing. There is such a lack of tension in Jane being worried for Clementine. You can even say that she really doesn't need to be. Yeah, why would anyone be at this point? It makes everyone look so dumb that they're still being caught off guard by these slow, loud, lumbering meat sacks. I can excuse this kind of ignorance in Season 1 because the characters don't know what they're up against yet, but by like 2 years into the apocalypse, these guys should just know better. I don't know how anyone gets overwhelmed by them. Or maybe that's the point. The characters at this point have become too comfortable and it only takes 1 or 2 walkers to run up on you and you're done for. I'm doing that thing again. It is a scene I've never seen before, but why do we need that caveat, that asterisk over an otherwise fine scene? I'm not saying there shouldn't be walkers around, what game do you think we're playing? But the reactions to it and the way the game just feels afraid to let nothing happen for a while, or one scene, when those were once the most treasured and memorable moments. It's so disappointing to see this lack of restraint. Yeah. Anywho, we return bandaged up and suddenly, Gabe decides to reveal that we shot Conrad effect. For reasons. No one was even pressing it or blaming him for what happened to Javier's shoulder, but he just starts blabbing because he has to, because conflict with Tripp has to occur. And then Tripp gets on his high horse saying some absolute nonsense like, "You looked me in my eyes," when all I actually said was Conrad effect lost his shit. He's acting like I lied to him. I guess I can't really care, I didn't like Tripp anyway. I actually preferred Conrad effect if I'm honest, but I had to kill him because, yeah, I don't even know what to say, it just feels so pointless. And now Gabe is just angsting so hard, and it's so annoying. Where does he get off, trying to potentially get me killed when I saved him? Like, geez, why is he even mad? Okay, so he's mad about being pushed aside. Yeah, it's not like you were literally just helping me get some guns. My guy, you were the main and sole partner on that operation. What are you talking about? And I don't buy this idea that we're supposed to be mad with Gabe, so this actually works, because most of Javier's remarks post this scene are all in a slightly jovial manner. Haha, isn't it so funny how you told Tripp I murdered his friend? What a hilarious moment that was had. Like, why can't I just be mad at the kid? Is this supposed to all be some allegory for struggling during puberty? Clementine literally has tampons, so why are we doing literal for her and figurative for Gabe? Where am I?
Let's go for a piss. Let's go for a piss.
To use another Star Wars example, when Kylo Ren killed Han Solo, it acted more as an allegory for a teenager telling their dad to fuck off, and less so as a literal murder in the real world that Kylo Ren must be imprisoned for because I'm very boring and care about that kind of thing in Star Wars suddenly. but the intent behind that was very obvious, to me. Here, less so, but I guess really it is as simple as the angst and strife contrasted with a zombie apocalypse. I will say that the ending is quite interesting, design-wise. You, of course, choose to save Tripp or Ava, but your choice is reversed either way, so saving Tripp actually kills him. Abstaining, like I had very initially planned to do because I just didn't care, just results in being killed, but that actually kind of works and makes sense here. They even used binging and the doctor Clementine was trying to wake up, but we put down, to paint that we're a killer, which is another kind of nice moment where it has some impact. Well, probably not if you didn't do it, but again, contextually that does work here because you're being framed, which is like the main thing I've been bitching about. The after effects of this all are frustrating, given that whoever you save just dies in the next episode and you have maybe 2 conversations with them at the most prior to it. It's really annoying and further punctuates how pointless choices can feel. Both characters are utterly expendable, even the one you've known since the first episode. I did have a fairly silly half-assed thought about making the choice between Clementine and David before realizing that both characters in the scenario end up dying anyhow, and at least one of them would still need to die in this very scene. So, as ever, I will complain about it and not offer any suggestion, but I'm getting confused now because I do like this a lot in theory and mostly in execution. My immediate thought as of writing this now is to not kill Mariana and maybe have her and Gabe be the 2 you choose between, with David also literally hanging in the balance. But that is quite grim. Then again, Telltale sure do love a kid killing. I'd say this episode had the most consistently okay stuff, and at this point I just accepted that I had to accept the dumb shit. Episode 2 had legit 1 decent scene, which I didn't even mention. This episode had at least 3.5, if not 4. Come on now.
Come on, Spunk Pockets.
Also, I forgot to mention the most important choice. Yes, I chose to romance Kate, which in my original video I kind of hand-waved as a moment where the game wanted me as Javier to do it, but me personally, I couldn't care less. This time, I actually did care a bit. Honestly, I quite like her. She's probably one of my favorites in the game, which isn't saying a lot. She is fairly glib to assume David could sense she was pulling away when he really wasn't at all. She even punctuates things by hugging Javier at the start of episode 5 and ignoring David, almost flirting in front of him. But you know, people are complicated and she feels like a real person in those ways, so I said sure. Otherwise, it dawned on me that at this point I was well and truly over the hill. I was tumbling down, in fact. No, stop laughing. This is a good metaphor, actually.
No, don't smile. He mentioned the post-match. Now it's on the other side of the hill now, going right down to the bottom. Whee!
No, maybe it's just maybe it's a false. Maybe there's more of the hill. You never know.
I was really grafting hard in the early to middle stages around Beyond Time and Space and Strong Bad territory. I was doing an episode every day at least, sometimes 2 a day if I could be fucked. And I'm never fucked. I never get fucked. But I'm never. Okay. Whoa. I mean, true. Why have I said this so many times in the video?
Who? I want to meet the virgin who writes these scripts.
By this point, I was playing an episode every few days, and the episodes were like half the length. It's also a good metaphor because being well over the hill, I'm now trying to almost slow myself down as I descend, if you get me.
That's a great addition to the metaphor.
Not because I don't want it to end, these games are all the same, and I've been editing this video for 2 months already, and I feel like I'm getting nowhere. But I guess because I've been slacking on it around this time. It always happens when I'm making a video at some stage, usually repeated stages, and since I've been at it since May, and it was December, I guess it wasn't unexpected. I also did stop for the last 3 weeks to make another video, but that was only in the writing I am currently doing now, not the playing of games. Anyway, whatever that means, home stretch or something. First thing I want to talk about in episode 5 is this absolutely bipolar, tonal whiplash of a scene with Eleanor. I never really mentioned Eleanor, but she was Prescott's doctor and recently in a relationship with Tripp. Anywho, she's fuming to see us after what happened with Tripp. Then she gets all sad and resolved about not meaning for it to turn out this way, and that you gotta believe her because she told Kenny Omega about our entire plan for reasons, and now it's done, and that's that. And then she goes back to fuming and points the finger at us. Now, to be fair, Kate did do a whoopsie at the end of the last episode, forgetting how to use brakes and letting in the herd, but it was David who escalated things by undermining my choice to take Clint Steele and leave, which I guess is contextual, and also it was, of course, Kenny Omega who made me choose between Tripp and Ava to begin with. Keep in mind, I did technically save Tripp as well, at least in intent, so what the fuck? What the fuck, Eleanor? The plan could have also worked if you, I don't know, didn't tell them about it, you fucking idiot. Man. I will be fair to Eleanor, she had sort of become their surrogate doctor since their actual doctor was a junkie and recently assisted suicide by ourselves and Clementine, So I can understand her trying to triage, as she says, because she's a doctor. Do you get it? I actually kind of like that. It's goofy in a good way to me. The problem, of course, is that her anger is directed toward me for doing absolutely nothing yet. I hadn't even chosen one of them to be killed, and she's already turned coat. Where did you get a coat, huh? She didn't steal Paul's spare, she was already gone. So I just forgave her because I can't take any more of this pointless forced drama that makes no sense, and it won't matter anyway because she literally disappears from the game after this point, trying to help the others. And I guess a positive worth mentioning is that we do see the effects of what's happened within the town. People are pretty mad with us for letting the walkers in, which is something, I guess. A woman then asks you to cut a guy's arm off, the same guy who told me to be quiet in the first episode. I said no, and immediately was like, actually I will do it, just for the banter. So I restart to the menu, and now I'm back 10 minutes ago when we just got inside. Why do these games have such awful checkpoints? The scene itself is idiotic as well. There's no plan for the aftermath, so the guy just predictably bleeds profusely and instantly dies. Javier could have aimed a little higher as well, I will say. She then decided to pull a gun on us, but now I'm confused if it's because of the guy we just mutilated or her daughter, though she does mention the daughter, so I'm being intentionally misleading. Haha.
Haha!
Anyway, David breaks her bastard arm to disarm her, which is a little unnecessary. I felt very weird and conflicted. On the one hand, everyone is against David, so part of me wants to side with him, but he's also just so unabashedly an asshole, and this abusive parent angle is sudden. I know I said he was always bad, but like, he wasn't this bad, surely. He was an asshole, he was unruly and stubborn, but he wasn't like a threat. I wasn't conflicted because he's a complex character who is conflicted and messy. It just felt like he was one thing and then another. The accompanying scene is good. David stands on the rooftop, and if you trust him, you can join him as he surveys the scene and points out all the possible military tactics, wondering if he can really change who he is or if a soldier is just a soldier. At this point, I'm convinced he is written to be intentionally a hypocrite, but it all feels a little rushed still. The opening flashback exemplifies it, as their father is found to have cancer and is unwilling to treat it, while David says, fuck the pride, just get better by any means, which I actually totally agree with, but didn't hear for reasons. Their father has a great line about all that you leave behind being legacy and bones, which is the game they're playing. Not legacy and bones, the game is just bones. The scene opens, though, with David, as usual, being an asshole, calling out Javier about his baseball and gambling mishaps, then not being able to take it when we throw it back at him. A scene later with Gabe harks back to this, as David would tell Gabe to never be like his uncle Javier, relying on others to solve your problems somehow not making you a real man. Yet he wanted his father to do exactly that, unless it's meant to be a criticism of his father since he gets pretty angry with him in the scene. Yeah, that actually works for me. Then Ava dies and the scene plays out like a genuine comedy. Like it doesn't even feel unintentional. Ava stops Javier from falling and tells him, bro, you gotta be more careful like. And then a walker instantly appears and they both fall off the highway and it is hilarious. Why is it funny? You can even say immediately with no hyperbole that Ava died a hero, which just makes it even funnier. But I didn't click that one because I'm not funny. Then we carry on because, ultimately, clearly, no one cares. Anywho, I disappoint my father in the game instead by breaking a promise to not give up on David, which prompts a fight after he tries to leave Richmond in the state it's in. He's not losing his family again, but they don't want to go with him. Then some stuff that I don't really care about happens until, damn it all to fuck hell, Kate goes missing. Not dead, but missing. Missing. Sorry, not, I forget the G sometimes. That's what he said. She's I don't have.
I feel like we've lost our way.
After David dies, if you go after him and Gabe instead of Kate and Clementine, which I didn't even really want to do, but it would have felt kind of jarring to not do after fighting with David, I guess, she's nowhere to be found. Well, where'd she bloody go? The one character I actually liked perished, and I guess that's actually kind of fitting, isn't it? I'm not even sure you can keep her around or alive. From memory, it's either this or she becomes a walker, so no matter what, you can't save her. Maybe it has something to do with whether or not you enter a relationship with her, but I don't really know what that would mean. Anyway, enough mourning for Kate. It's been 3 days, time to be gay with Jesus.
I'd use this audio from a game.
Was mad.
Anyway.
But then there's a strange choice regarding her coming back with AJ, or not doing that. Given Season 4, I don't really understand what happened here. Having finished Season 4, same. There are also multiple endings again, which I also complained about in my initial video. I'm kind of not wrong as well. Having multiple endings is nice, but it doesn't end up mattering when the inevitable sequel happens and disregards all but one ending that you may not have even gotten. It's still a nice touch that I've come around on somewhat, but I don't entirely disagree with my 16-year-old self, so I'll let him take over.
But here's something that everyone is praising: multiple endings. Who fucking cares? I'm sorry, but why should I care about multiple endings when I know that Season 4 will just have one continuous story that we're all experiencing? I'll admit, it is cool that there are different scenarios that can happen, but did we really have to wait a whole game to get it once at the end? And does anyone actually think it's going to be different depending on your choices? Especially when you look at how much Season 2's endings impacted this season. Oh no. Oh wait. They were the worst part of each episode. Ooh, gotta say, I'm not feeling the hype, guys. But if we're actually being serious for a moment, I'm really just worried that what happened with the multiple endings in Season 2 will happen with this season, since I really don't see how Telltale could pull off a bunch of different stories all at once.
Like, I'm not wrong, but the way I say it makes me want to just beat that kid up. Actually, I am sort of wrong, because really, the endings aren't any different, it's more just how Clementine ended up going into Season 4. The actual ending for her, at least, is the exact same thing. It's just changing the context, which is what I'm always saying they should do. I'm not sure I realized this in my video, since my point of criticism seems honestly more aimed towards Season 2 for this. Okay, so in theory, A New Frontier is my favorite Telltale game, I guess. The stuff that does change depending on your ending doesn't even matter as well, since none of these characters return in Season 4, which sounds like a bad thing, but is actually a good thing.
That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Because it means nothing is disregarded that way. So, to clarify, because I'm making a mess of this as always, A New Frontier does have different endings and outcomes and scenes depending on what you choose, but none of it is made redundant in Season 4 because it doesn't really matter. It becomes finally at the end an isolated thing. Therefore, it can't be undone. And I guess I like that. I don't even know anymore. I do know a little more after watching a video on the many endings of A New Frontier, and hot dog gang, there are some surprisingly interconnected options. I can't, and I'm not going to run through all the variations, but basically any variation you can imagine seems doable. David can live, Kate can indeed live, Gabe can die, David can leave altogether. Clementine will go after Gabe or help Kate depending on something, I'm sure. Other things.
There's more.
Yeah.
And as mentioned, even the fucking Conrad effect can live to the end. Okay, maybe they were cooking with this game after all. Shit. I suppose it is ultimately another final episode that is finally allowed to have consequences, but again, that kind of works for this one. And well, that's the game. I am conflicted, though it probably doesn't seem like it since I've been so negative. There's a lot of neat ideas and obvious attempts to tell the story, but a lot of it just didn't work. It still feels too similar, and while also flawed, Season 2 really deviated in ways that made it mostly work. It's just an odd game to me. I ended up having a worse time with it if my ratings are anything to go by, yet I feel less negative on it in my mind. Maybe there is some weird closure I had with replaying it and reaffirming that, yes, I still dislike it and probably always will at this point. I hate that I don't like it. I want nothing more now than to love this game, but it just doesn't really do it for me, and that's a shame because as we've just realized, in theory this game has a lot of potential in the areas that I'm intrigued by. Fuck it, man, I'm already questioning myself again. Do I have to replay this bastard game again and just really deviate in every conceivable way? Surely there is some way for me to enjoy this one, to accept its flaws and come out of it saying, hey, that wasn't so bad. Well, maybe one day, but I'm not there right now. I did have an idea some weeks after playing the game though, with implications for the entire game, and I kind of love it personally. Instead of binging with Badger being the one who decides to jump the kid, why not have David be the one to okay the attack that got Mariana killed? Think about it. David turns heel and throws all this family talk in our face. He shows that he's a military tactician, he's a soldier, that's all he can see or think about. That's all he's good at. So imagine if they portrayed that by having him be the one that got his own daughter killed after word gets back to him about the yogurt bandits, not realizing who he was authorizing his people to attack. And you can have him react the same way. He's upset, but ultimately downplays it because he'll handle it himself. It could have been neat to have him be directly responsible for it, instead of indirectly by way of an underling. That would also presumably give the New Frontier genuine pause and concern for him being head of security, so when they revoke his position, I would actually understand why. Just imagine the actual villains themselves being unsettled by David's nonchalance about his own daughter dying at his hand. It also again puts more doubt into your mind about him and whether or not he can be changed. It works in that way since David is a massive hypocrite and will throw it back at you regardless, so there'd be more reason for him to deflect blame onto us. He may have gotten his daughter killed, but we were the ones looking after her. We should have kept her safe in the first place. I don't know, but I like it and think it'd be weird and cool, but maybe it's too far.
It's kind of dark, but I like it.
But if you're gonna kill the kid, you might as well make it mean something that reverberates throughout the entire game. And if we were playing as David, and this all somehow made sense still and worked, it'd be a hell of a reveal to find out that you, the player, just killed your daughter. Yeah, that's fun, isn't it? The funniest of all funny things, though, is that I realized something else about this game.
Oh, shut up.
It's hour 9.
Something I didn't realize until I was writing in the script for Season 2 of The Walking Dead, a whole month after finishing every game. A New Frontier is one of the only games, maybe the only one really, that actually accounts for your choices and makes them matter. It's just not very significant to the main plot. Well, besides those endings, I suppose. As you'll remember, there are several flashbacks pertaining to whatever ending you chose in Season 2, and the game actually does bother to pay off those endings. They're not exactly desirable, though I officially denounce my bitching about Kenny's lack of blazing glory. Fuck that cliche and boring hero shit, especially for a character like Kenny. But they are there. There are 3 different versions of those flashbacks depending on your ending. It's clear to me now why Clementine was even in this game. They wanted to tell a new story, but didn't want to leave fans without resolution to their choices, so they put Clementine in the game and had those flashback sections because that's a lot easier than making a whole other game with 3 individual storylines per episode. I don't even think they should have done that if they could have. I doubt it would have turned out well. It's bad enough making 2 games at once, now you're essentially making 4 or 5, so the inclusion of these flashbacks is kind of worth praising. Usually, games default to one canonical ending and disregard every other one, which makes it feel a little stupid to me, but they actually made an attempt to conclude and reconcile Season 2's multiple endings. Though I do think it's a little ironic that they had to create an entire other game to facilitate and tell these conclusions because they weren't able to, again, make 3 different versions of the one game. I guess what I'm saying is, the choices definitely mattered in some regard, but was it worth it? I said in my initial video that Clementine and the game at large feels inconsequential and like filler before the final season, and that still feels accurate given this context, maybe even more so now after realizing this. I even said in that video that the flashbacks were consistently the worst parts of the game and story, which is just really funny to me since people care a whole lot about choices mattering, and when they actually do, it's not really all it's cracked up to be. Admittedly, this game isn't exactly the gold standard in any department, so I guess it's more the game being kind of bad and less the concept of choices mattering. It's how you do it at the end of the day, not the fact that it's just there. As I've probably mentioned, even the first Walking Dead game wasn't immune to that. None of these games really work in that way, and they never have. So I do find it funny that people complain about it as if it's something that is now missing from these games when it was never actually there to begin with. You just thought it was because it was a lot more convincing how they got around it. I think what may have been a neater idea is to have another 3-episode mini-series revolving around each ending. One with Jane, one with Kenny, one alone. Tell it as a canonical thing depending on what episode you choose to be that, and then just throw the other 2 episodes in there for people to also play. Or just do a whole episode in A New Frontier that is a flashback. Either way, things get wrapped up for the final season, and they do pay off the choices. There's only one section of the final season that calls back to this game, and even then, you could just still have it in there without needing to elaborate on what's happening. I'm not sure, and I don't think they were either, but it sure seems like they tried, and frankly, I'm just tired of bullying this game now. And my voice is just tired of having to be spoken with words. Ugh. Alright, I guess that's that then. Jesus.
There's some analysis for you.
Wow,
Jesus
that's some
Christ.